Welcome guys, gals and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary and feminist perspective. My name is Joel, one of your hosts, and with me as always is the other Sisyphean host.
Oh, Brian, I was not here.
Yeah, and now you are. At the top of that hill, roll straight back down into the Buffy Boys pit.
True. Pit or, hole or... Joel, do you have any Buffy fatigue?
Do I have any Buffy fatigue? Not as much as you might anticipate.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some. I've never watched I think like any sane person, I've never watched a show over such a long period of time.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, the vast majority of people who've watched Buffy probably, depends. The original people who watch Buffy over a much longer period of time. It's
not the same as a weekly show, I think. When you know that you could be watching more and you're just not, that's a different energy, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest takeaway I have is that, if this was in any way my choice, I would be barren. After watching the first couple episodes of season 1, I would have been like, oh, let's spend the next month and a half watching Buffy and nothing else,
Yeah. I at the same time, I feel like when we do finish the show, I feel like after an appropriate break, I'll probably just put it on in the background at a much higher, speed of progression again. Yeah.
I think that's a good plan. Is I think after this, I think Buffy has to take as the step of being, or in the show in our house will have to be something that's on the background while you're making dinner kind of thing, or something like that. And then maybe 2 years down the line, we can do a genuine rewatch again.
Yeah. And then we'll be like, oh, remember when Mark Field said this about that? What good times.
I'm going to purge all that information from my brain immediately upon the conclusion of this podcast, as if I haven't already.
Mm-hmm.
So this episode is Into the Woods. It is season 5, episode 10. It was first aired on December 19th, 2000. There's a little bit of Christmassy stuff happening in the episode, and this is the Christmas episode. There's not a further Christmas episode because that will be on the 26th, and that will be madness.
We need to redefine madness after this year, but anyway.
Mm-hmm. It was written and directed by Marty Noxon. This is the first of 2 episodes she directs. She also directs Forever in season 5 or 6. Season 6, I think. Anyway, which is interesting. I'm not sure what motivated the directorial debut for her. She said it was terrifying.
Yeah, interesting.
Exciting.
People, I'm curious about what is it about the writing process or the acting process that leads people to be like, I would like to direct.
Yeah, I mean, I think I really don't know. And when you see things genuinely not great directors, as in people who on the cast, so say your David Schwimmers or your Riker's actor's name is
Jonathan
Frakes, directing episodes of their TV shows respectively, and they're another TV episode of that season, as in there's nothing specific, special, or you're kind of like, oh, so is this just kind of a power play for you? I mean, to some degree at that point in the show, with a lot of shows, the show is running itself, in terms of directorial vision. So I mean, I don't super understand it. So we're going
Buffy on summary.
Oh yeah, I'll do that. The tumor is safely removed. Graham asks, oh wait, would they talk about Riley after saying that though? Oh, they meant Joyce's tumor. I thought they're just referring to Riley's tumor. Okay. The tumor is safely removed. Graham asks Riley to join a unit fighting demons in Belize. Spike tells Buffy that Riley uses vampire horrors. Okay.
Quote unquote.
Yeah, but there's no quotes here. Anyway. Riley stakes Spike with a piece of plastic wood as a warning. They bond over drink and hopeless love for Buffy. Riley offers Buffy an ultimatum. Xander convinces her to ask Riley to stay, but she pauses to kill the vampire whores and misses his helicopter. Xander tells Anya he loves her. Okay, well, good to start off as we absolutely do not mean to go on. Because there's no comparison between sex work and what's happening in this episode beyond the framing. Sex work is legitimate. It is often, a fully conscious, fully aware decision people make. It is often as well people who are in difficult situations, neither of which is taking advantage of someone who is has some sort of death wish. So yeah, and additionally, of course, the word whores is gross. It's misogynistic, and it's I'm not sure if it's below Buffy for the time of the TV show, in one sense, in the sense that in one way you're kind of okay, well, Buffy in that moment you know, probably wasn't representing herself the best in the conversation between her boyfriend, where she's angry with him for cheating on her, basically. But additionally, I don't like it as a color on Buffy. I further absolutely do not like it as a color on what is supposed to be an academic text.
Yeah, I think that needs some interrogation from an academic perspective.
Realistically, use the word prostitute in that situation at that time, which was a much less charged term. Of course, we don't use that word now because it's, again, further othering, and
it's also like a kind of like an oldie timey word to a certain degree. Anyway, we'll unpack that. But in the interim,
it's not hard to not be a shit person.
And yet, so many people struggle.
Go on.
Bronze banter is where we banter in the bronze. In this episode, funnily enough, there is a reference to the bronze because they do suggest Anya wants to bring Dawn there and get her drunk on strawberry schnapps.
And that made me immediately want strawberry schnapps, which I never had before.
Yeah. So for bronze banter, we return to the life-giving television well, and we have finished 2 exceptional TV shows this week, of which we will likely have at least some spoilers, I think, in course of trying to talk about them. Yeah,
so maybe skip to I don't know, what time is it now?
The end of our conversation.
Yeah, I don't know. Just skip forward ahead, and like if you I don't know, just go watch the shows if you want to watch them. So we finished Bly Manor and Lovecraft Country. Bly Manor, I wish we had talked about it last week in some ways because I was much more enthusiastic about it then. Bly Manor, if you're going to watch it, skip episode 8 is my full genuine. The penultimate episode is one of the worst episodes of TV I've seen in a long time. It is so misjudged, so mismanaged, and one of the dullest, most pace-sucking extremity I've ever seen on TV. It was just awful.
It's rare that I would make a similar recommendation. I would absolutely say skip episode 8 entirely. It detracts. And
feel free to look it up. Look what happens in it. But like it's a backstory where we find out that the backstory has no motivation, no pull, no draw, no fire, and it's shot kind of dully over its length of over an hour.
Yeah, and shot. Yes, basically we Bly Manor overall. Definitely worth watching. Definitely enjoyable.
Hugely enjoyed it.
Moment to moment enjoyability. Moment to moment characters, pleasant, all that kind of stuff.
The like 5 or so main characters, all genuinely well written and very enjoyable, except for Elliot from E.T., who I didn't like, but whatever.
I don't know. I found him quite. He's chewing the scenery. So absolutely worth watching, and for reasons which we'll probably come to slightly momentarily. From a kind of a queer, a horror, a gothic perspective, absolutely a worthy addition to the canon. What these stories never need is like, oh, what's spooky, scary? How could this happen? Why did it happen? Here's how it happened. It wasn't very interesting. That's essentially what this episode was. It was a ye olde timey Regency days or whatever flashback. Some really camp, goofy moments in it, but also the whole thing was shot in black and white because anything in the past is in black and white.
But then stuff that was slightly less in the past, but not fully in the future. So things in the 17th century, definitely black and white. Things in the 19th century, color, and it was like, like if that's the decision you're making, that's the decision you're making.
Yeah,
it's not a decision I would make then.
Yeah, genuinely, and I'm not nearly as hyperbolic as Brian, who is probably the most hyperbolic person I've met in my entire life, possibly anywhere in the world.
I've told you like 1,000 times, not to exaggerate.
But that episode is probably one of the worst episodes of television I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think it's one of those situations where it had further to fall and genuinely pacing problems.
Yeah,
but I think overall, I think I would say Bly Manor, a lot of fun. I think I have a slight preference for it over Hill House because Hill House was hokey, whereas Bly Manor was kind of reserved, quite spooky, and great premise. Nothing to do with Turn of the Screw. The whole Turn of the Screw premise starts and ends at 2 children, dead parents, governess, and that's it.
Yeah. The scaffolding of it is there, which is, for better or for worse, because the less I think about it as trying to actually adapt the story for what there is of the Turn of the Screw, the better, I think.
Yeah.
But and I think there is a fervent, ardent, and worthwhile debate of the conclusion of the show in terms of its main characters, and from a queer perspective and all that, which I won't get into great detail on.
There's a very significant, very worthwhile, genuinely warmly portrayed queer content.
Yeah. And like all things, endings can be controversial. I can have different villains and that, but again, moment to moment, I think actually like a really sterling addition to like a well realized queer love story. And I actually would advocate going into it and approaching it with that knowledge in mind, that that's not an add-on, it's fundamental, and enjoying it for that. I've come to, as much as I'm not like, oh, spoilers, whatever, but like
queerness isn't a spoiler. I mean,
yeah, see, this is it. As much as I like to be surprised by the story, I do enjoy the comfort factor of going into something knowing that it's going to be queer. Yeah, so absolutely. I think I would signpost that. Okay,
Lovecraft Country concluded on Sunday night. We're recording this on Tuesday, and we watched it last night. I loved it.
I loved it. We waxed lyrical last year about Watchmen, and while not similar shows in many ways,
and not quite as high quality, not quite as tight writing, and structurally like immaculate as Watchmen was,
but shares some commonalities in the sense of like a really wonderful and challenging rendition of both a genre and genre spaces, and also how black people can inhabit those spaces, should and haven't, and won't
do so by force,
have been restrained from doing so.
Both specifically hit on the Tulsa Massacre extensively, which I think is wonderful. I think it's come up a lot in recent with any Black Lives Matter discussion. Like, I mean, any of that has been like so influenced by the Tulsa Massacre, which if you haven't read about the Tulsa Massacre, it's worth reading about. And it's very interesting, because I think the huge takeaway from it is that, like, you know, there were absolutely people killed. Like, I mean, the white people in the situation brought an airplane to shoot at black people on the streets. But most importantly,
it was in the 20s as well.
Sorry?
This is like in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. It was in the 20s. Most importantly, from what I gather, and I might be misremembering this, but I think 60,000 people, or 60,000 black people, were had their homes destroyed. So I was trying to find the word there. Were displaced. And
made homeless or displaced.
And it was like, you know, a thriving black community, and of course that had to be destroyed. Just horrifying stuff. But definitely, I would rewatch Watchmen earlier. I think episode to episode enjoy Watchmen better. I think it is a better TV structure.
You rewatch Watchmen?
I would rewatch Watchmen.
Oh, you would? I thought you already have. Okay.
I would rewatch it tomorrow. But Lovecraft Country was speculative. It was strong. It like set out to have a singular mission to be able to show black people in every genre, fiction, quality, context that it could, from space opera to, you know, Tomb Raider kind of stuff, and to like that kind of
adventure, to comics, pulp, etc.
Horror and haunted houses and all this stuff. And through it all, it always gave a fun context to what it was doing, while never overlooking the horror of racism, and like specifically racism towards black people in America and worldwide. And it was a powerhouse of a TV show, and absolutely one of the most gripping things I've ever watched.
Absolutely. I would add to that it does horror, gore and prestige television, and obviously like quite like unvarnished and rightly so racism in terms of portraying it, with a confidence and a sincerity that puts a lot of prestige TV shows, I think, to absolute shame. As in, like, you know, portraying these things doesn't have to be this chewy mouthful of just like misery for the viewer. It can be something which is like on fire. And I think that there's a couple of episodes, like episode to episode, gripping. Complete fucking roller coaster. I've never gone to so many different places with a show and being absolutely convinced there's no way this is connected, and it actually all comes together in not like a mystery kind of way, but just like it knew where it was going the whole time. And some of the episodes really affected me, gave me that Fleabag effect of like, I am having a physical reaction to what I'm watching. And
my only note would be, of course, in episode 5, I think, in the Indiana Jones one, there is a massively problematic portrayal of a two-spirit indigenous American. Oh, maybe she's not American, actually.
It might have been South America. It was the Americas.
We're not. The character is not given any pronouns. So, like, I mean, I think within the show
we're
they refer
extrapolating
to
from
as
context, yeah.
she, her, but and she's killed quite brutally for kind of bad, for not good reasons, and that's just like, I mean, I don't think that's doing. I think that was a mistake in the writers' room part. I don't think it's intentionally queerphobic. I don't think it was super well handled though.
And there is other queer content in it,
Yep.
and I think it is there. It is present. It is not as obviously as well handled as some of the racial issues in it and the socioeconomic and all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't enough to alienate me. And I'm like, this. You know, this is not. I didn't feel that the mishandling where it was there was hostile.
No, I think I was listening to a podcast where some people from the writers' room were talking about it, and they said, "Yeah, this is kind of what we were trying to portray. If we've misstepped there, then like, yeah, I'm genuinely sorry." And it's kind of the thing is with those kind of situations, what you want to know is that if you're communicating these things to writers, to the world, that it's going to be better taken into account next time, or it's going to be taken into account for future representation. You don't throw a show about black people that well crafted and so hard won out with the bathwater, essentially, is what I would suggest.
It's a perennial issue that happens where something which is making a genuine effort, if it makes a misstep, gets kind of it gets crucified to a certain degree, where there's so many things out there that aren't bothering and kind of don't get that kind of scrutiny. So I agree with you on that. I also think its conclusion has a strength which is not the same as a Buffy conclusion, but is definitely playing in the same space in a way. It was like, like the marmalade, not marmalade, what's the other one?
Marzipan?
No, kind of like, if you kind of have the real booger of, chosen, you have the spread of this. Yeah,
you mean margarine.
Margarine, yeah. So yeah, absolutely recommend it. So going from, I suppose, quite a deft portrayal of social issues to this episode of Buffy and its vampire crack brothels.
So to start with, I think this episode has a deep problem at its core, which is that it is another escape hatch. So in the same way that I didn't like Wild at Heart, which I believe was the episode where Oz leaves.
My boyfriend, Wild.
That's spelled with a Y though. So for some reason I didn't like that, where it felt, while potentially well done to a degree, it also kind of like left a mess in its wake for a situation where you were just kind of writing someone out. I feel like that here too. I think this episode really removed Buffy's voice in a situation, which I think is it is the second time that has happened to Buffy, where she's committed to a relationship and the person who she's with basically decides the situation for her, that she shouldn't be with them, basically.
Second time she'll have her voice removed as well.
Yeah, true. Hush. And Hush, of course, being very relevant to this episode, because Hush really highlighted the communication issues that Buffy and Riley had from the very beginning. But yeah, this episode is it's a bit bizarre. It's not unenjoyable. I think Marty Noxon, scene to scene, is an excellent writer of the characters. But yeah, the sex work parallels here, and it's a funny one because I think it's discussed within the episode. I think Willow and Giles are only moments away from saying it's kind of harmless, if they want to do that themselves, it's kind of up to them. So the context being, there's a house, a crack house style place where vampires will go with willing humans and the humans pay them to suck their blood because they get off on it, and it's kind of a mutually beneficial kind of situation. And Buffy finds out that Riley has been using one of these because Spike brings her to it. So yeah, I don't think we even need to talk about the parallels with sex work, because the show drops parallels as an easy cultural communication, but I don't think it warrants inspection in the year 2020.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't map in any way. It maps insofar as, if anything, this vampire brothel den kind of place resembles the boogeyman of these kind of situations that might be seen on the nightly news, rather than anything actual, because the key differentiation, and one which Buffy highlights, is that they are kind of canonically monsters, killers, evil, essentially, you know. So there's almost an interesting conversation to have there around the fact that, and this actually draws parallels with Angel's episode this week as well.
Yeah,
but
sure.
With Giles, like Buffy is obviously tied up with the whole Riley aspect of it. But Giles is very like, oh, well, like I knew about these from my Ripper days, and I didn't know it was specifically happening in Sunnydale, but you know, him and Ong, you're like, this has happened for centuries. People do this kind of stuff, and Buffy at times can be very like,
Puritanical.
this is puritanical, this is horrible, I must destroy it, etc. Obviously, like calling the vampires feeding on Riley as his whores, you know, it's like such an odd, loud, dissonant note.
It's a funny one as well, because I think it's very uncomfortable, because while Riley last week killed Sandy, I think was the vampire, out of like shame for having let her feed on him, Buffy is kind of reprimanded, specifically textually, by Xander for, while she's attacked by the gang of I don't know, what do you want to call them? Vampires. When she's attacked by the vampires, Xander specifically gives out to her for enacting revenge, essentially. Yeah. And it's like this kind of, there's a little bit of double standard here, as well as, because, you know, Buffy's expected to be morally pure, she's expected to be morally distinguishing, but like even within the show, it's so messy, the whole idea of vampires, because you, especially with the current heavy-handed representation of Spike as actually someone who's kind of sympathetic, really, even though he's just been defanged. You know, the impulses are all there, presumably, and he's like turning up in her bedroom and like listening to them have sex from outside, and like none of this is like irascible behavior. I think the show at times gets into a messy space when it comes to vampires, the representation of vampires and the balance of them, and like I'm fine with that, as in like, get messy. I don't need this to be a perfect metaphor for all things, but when it gets to condemnation of characters for their actions towards them, it then also gets very odd, because like the use of vampires here, or in Buffy originally, and presumably just generally, is to say, here is a foe which can be killed with no emotional recourse, which is like plain spoken, straightforward, like Angel being a very clear exception because he had a soul, and soul versus unsouled being a distinction that is useful, but otherwise, like, you know, it's not like it kind of breaks its own rules with this kind of stuff. And in many ways, the horror and the defense mechanism of the vampire in the early show is this kind of thing of like, they look like your loved one, they talk like your loved one, they will lure you in with that, but it's not them in there, and that's horrifying. Where it's like, but if they kind of also have their own third personality, is a whole other thing. And yes, specifically when she murders all these vampires, and what is a reasonably cool fight sequence, because she goes stake like 7 of them in like quick succession. Seconds, but the one specifically, the vamp woman who was feeding on Riley, who looks really kind of emaciated and like Courtney Cox.
Well, she lets her go, and the vamp seems relieved, and it just looks like a kind of shattered woman with vamp makeup, and then she runs away, and Buffy spears her with a massive stake from 20 feet away. It's like, I'm not sure, I wouldn't be quite so gauche as to say, and this is like an anti-feminist, etc., but it's like, I'm not sure what to take from it. It's not a great look in many ways. It's messy because they've written it messy. You know, we're not sure what to take of it because the show gives you conflicting messages about what it means. And not helped by Xander. Okay, so let's do a quick retrospective on the Riley relationship. This episode marks one whole season since Mark Blucas was added to the main cast, and he's lasted a season, and that's it. I think to start with, he was quite well suited for Buffy. I think they were quite excited about each other, and it was quite a nice relationship, quite understanding and quite developed. I think they dumbed Riley down in this season and flattened out his personality because they were aware that the relationship wasn't doing well with viewers, which is fine. You know, I think, you know, viewer response to a major element in the show has to be an aspect of how you write. But I think his departure here is
a bitter one, having the character having been like, flattened to some degree.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that a couple of the characteristics of Riley's early portrayal was that he genuinely seemed not only completely unbothered by the fact that Buffy was more powerful than him, but like drew energy from that, could be in harmony with that, and also was just a bit smarter. Like specifically was like, a psych TA, and like obviously had been selected for the initiative because of his like aptitude, and was just able to keep up with the conversation that was markedly contrasted by when his behavioral modification stuff went awry. He acted much more aggressively, etc. And yet the last few episodes of this season, he is kind of a little kind of straight man brought onto a drag show for a makeover and is now being kind of aggro with everyone for some reason.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I think specifically we finally got an explanation of why he is getting bit, and
it's really stupid.
Yeah, it all comes out kind of in a flood of like unbaked exposition where it's like, oh, I started off because I wanted to know what you felt when Angel would bite you, or when you let Dracula bite you, and what they did for you that I can't, and what's the excitement. I wanted to understand your world. And she says, okay, so like you kind of, I'm being a bit distant, so you try to get yourself killed. Like it's like, yeah, it's a massive escalation, but it doesn't. I think it's probably reeks from the writer's room. It's like, this is like a shocking image, but it's like, but how could they tie back together to a certain degrray? Yeah.
Realistically, what's happened here is they've written him as Owen from Never Kill a Boy on the First Date. In the end, they've just kind of like circled back to that. But yeah, it's a mess. And it's just not great. And yeah, what happens is that Xander comes along and chides Buffy for not letting Riley in more while her mother is dying. Yeah. Which, I mean, could you fuck off, Xander, please? I mean, these last moment are like, conversations with Xander, whether it be, Willow says go kick his ass, or this, or the crayon like conversation being the most
significant
positive of the three, or like those kinds of styles conversations, like I find them so fucking grating and so above, like, just he's so like, he's such a shithead. Like in this situation, he basically says, Buffy, don't you love Riley so much actually because he's a once in a lifetime guy, you should fight for him. I don't know anything about your relationship, but you've treated this guy with nothing but total kindness and consideration and warmth, but that's not enough. It's just like, fuck off. Like, if she's genuinely doing her best and that's not good enough for Riley, or he's not feeling loved, fucking communicate that, Riley. Say, I'm not feeling loved. Maybe
I find, inevitably in these conversations she's like, here's this piece of information you didn't have because why would you, about how he's doing all this stuff, and he's like, oh yeah. Yeah, but he does persistently play this kind of like almost like conscience kind of character. Yeah. But like a maladjusted conscience. Yeah.
I have a question for you actually. Mm-hmm. Do you think this is supposed to be representation of how Xander is actually emotionally stunted relationship wise? Like, his communication here and his kind of reading of all this onto Anya at the end of the episode. Do you think this is supposed to predict what happens like towards the wedding kind of situation?
Yeah, I think this is reflective of him feeling that, him feeling constantly that he has the bead on what's happening, but never having to do any of the reflective work involved with that. And his relationship with Anya, while it has its positives, is quite juvenile in many ways and adolescent, and even when you see them together, it's really just bickering, sex, and a bit of poutiness
and
correction. Yeah. And even like in this episode where she's like, oh, you want to go home and have sex, and he's like, oh, I have other plans, and he just kind of walks out of the room, not necessarily in a rude way, but just kind of like, I've been thinking of her, and it's kind of like, I'm not saying any of this is horrible, but it's like there's no sense of them connecting.
Would you say this isn't horrible?
Yeah, this isn't horrible. Yeah. So it was his supreme male confidence. I think he's like, and with all this knowledge I have from my kind of relationship, I'm going to lecture Buffy, who has been through far more than I will ever be through. In this space. Yeah.
For me, the most like important thing here is that Riley and Xander both just think that their experiences and their information is more important than her lived experience in a situation. which is that like, hey, she's traumatized and doing her best and being lovely, and sorry if she couldn't, listen to Riley more while her mom was dying, but also fuck off.
And it sets up this kind of faux dramatic moment where so Riley meets up with
it's quite a good image.
It is. Let's talk through it though. So Riley hooks up with this unit led by Graham Cracker, his old college buddy, who are demon hunting, and they make the distinction. It's like, no, we're not like the government eggheads trying to understand monsters. We're army. We just kill them, and that's like the better option, which I think is quite funny. But they're like, yeah, we're going to South America, so we need like a guy who can do this, etc. So he's like, I'm leaving on a helicopter at midnight from one of the many helicopter pads around town.
My turtleneck.
My turtleneck, yeah. And
he never says midnight either. He just says tonight.
He doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't say that. He also doesn't say where he's leaving from. So how she manages to sprint across town to find him is questionable. But yeah, so she runs to try and get to the helicopter on time. She gets there, she's shouting up, he can't hear her, and the issue is he's just not looking out the window, and that's kind of why the relationship ends. And I think it kind of implies like if she had just gotten there in time, maybe it could have been different. It's like he presumably is going to check his email at some point. Do you know what I mean? Like you can probably still connect, you can probably still contact him.
Yeah, but also the ultimatum, I think, says enough about his character that he doesn't deserve to be like Buffy. So
ultimatum, and also Buffy, I want you to hit me, and all this kind of stuff. And it's just like the energy is all off there.
Yeah, I cheated on you, but you need to decide by midnight tonight if we're going to be together or else I'm leaving the country. And also, could you smack me? And how's your mom doing? She's still dying. Does she survive that brain tumor?
Yeah.
Fucking cunt. Anyway, so come here. The title. What did you make of the title of the episode?
So I think in one sense it's a reference in the episode. She says about her mother when she gets out of surgery that they're out of the woods.
Yeah,
it's like, no, actually, like you're moving into like a more difficult period, really. Yeah. I imagine there's some comparisons to be drawn with the show of the same name or the musical of the same name.
The Stephen Sondheim, yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember enough about the musical to make those comparisons.
Okay, so the Stephen Sondheim musical, its structure is, and there was a Meryl Streep adaptation a couple of years ago. It was one of the worst movies I've ever seen in cinema. The music is so fucking dull in the musical. It's the da 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 da.
You'll get copyright strikes for that.
Yeah, I don't like it. Anyway, the structure of the musical is that the first half is the fairy tales of a situation. So I think it's Little Red Riding Hood and, I don't know, Cinderella, something else. I can't remember. Whatever.
Big Bag Beagle Boards.
Snow White? Is it Snow White?
Sure.
I think, anyway, it's three fairy tales, and they kind of see them through to a fairy tale ending. And then the second half of the play is the reality of the fairy tales and it being kind of like having some insidious dark elements to them, which I always found to be kind of stupid because fairy tales, I mean, that's only works if you're reading the thing as fairy tale ending and not looking at the rest of the dark shit, like Hansel and Gretel going to get eaten and then push a witch into the oven, or Little Red Riding Hood, like, her grandmother is still dead in most versions of the story and stuff like this.
I think what complicates this for me as well is that when I did see Into the Woods in the theatre, I did try to leave it intermission because I thought the play was finished.
Yeah, that will do it. Yeah. So, I think this episode is kind of about the kind of like the twistiness of happy endings, and definitely there's aspects of the out of the woods, into the woods, kind of like things are getting worse, especially for Joyce. They're not kind of end nicely, but
especially it's one of the cruelest Craigish cold opens in Buffy history because it hangs on Buffy for the doctor waiting to say whether Joyce survived the operation or not. Yeah,
it's very sad. And there was another point at which Xander was kind of a bit of a bastard, where Willow was like, "What time is it?" And he's like, "Just check the clock." She's like, "But you have a watch," and he's like, "It says the same thing."
He's just like, "What's wrong with you?" He can be quite difficult. Like you want to like him.
But yeah, I think generally that's my general thoughts on the episode.
What do you think of what's our kind of overall verdict thing on Riley as a partner for Buffy? Do we
start off promising? Mark Blucas is quite attractive, so that's good. But they never quite had the they never had anything approaching the chemistry of Buffy and Angel, of course. And they never really got into like the most Buffy Riley centric episode in terms of their romance. Like there are two of them. One is Hush, which is electrifying and brilliant, and the other one is Where the Wall Things Are, which was incredibly stupid. So yeah, I mean that kind of sums up the whole relationship really.
Yeah.
Like remember like in, like Where the Wild Things Are, the problem was that they were like too into each other and couldn't get away from each other, and now it's like, oh, it fit like it's just so stupid. Sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say, and then there's the odd question of whether, and like I know that Joss Whedon has had some contrasting comments with this over the years, but whether or not Buffy can have a healthy relationship and whether people want to go see her in that, etc. I obviously think that she can. I think that she's in a quite a precarious life position, being the Vampire Slayer, which contributes to these things to a certain degree. But I don't think she has enough motivation for it to a certain degree in the show.
She has other pressing problems
and I think that as you say, looking back, we can look at the show in kind of critical hindsight through our Palantir and all that, and say like, this is how this should work and that should work. But when the show was actually airing and was being written, there is those pressures of the people currently watching it. Are they enjoying the storyline or not? And if Riley wasn't electrifying for people, then she wasn't electrifying for Buffy. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, should we move into the dusting?
Absolutely.
All right. So do you have any Buffy bits there, Joel?
Yeah. Xander has in the apartment has a toolbox on the wall. He has like a rack of tools, which I thought was really strange. And we were debating whether or not the set that we see, the kind of Victorian bedroom that Anya has in this episode, is actually the same bedroom she has later in
Once More Feeling,
or what I was about to call Jesus Christ Superstar.
Same thing.
So a very strange note where Riley menaces Spike by stabbing him with a stake, which is made of plastic but which has been cut to look like it has wood grain.
What use is this?
Where was this commissioned? Is this a cosplay item that he bought from somewhere?
Just bizarre.
And I also enjoyed the part where Joyce was trying on different wigs with Buffy.
That was good.
Yeah.
And I think for my Buffy bits, there's one. The episode ends with a dedication to Gunnar Gustafsson. No, Gustafsson. Sorry. Oh God, my handwriting is too bad. I think maybe it's Gustafsson. Apologies. Anyway, but he worked in the props department in Buffy, and apparently was quite good friends with Sarah Michelle Gellar, and he died of cancer or AIDS at the age of 41. Not good. Another Buffy bit I have is a couple of. I really don't think Dawn should say boinking. I don't like that. The sex that they're having though is truly the most boring, dull, basic sex of all time. Was just incredibly upsetting.
Vanilla shortbread of sex.
When they visit the vampire lair, it's filmed like a weird gritty documentary. Suddenly it gets very handheld and shaky, and it was just like there's no need.
Yeah. There's a little bit where Dawn says that she used to, in her memories, she used to put in straws into her mouth and say, "I'm a vampire," run around, and Buffy would pretend to stake her. Yeah. I was like, I don't know what to make of that at all. Yeah.
It's also very odd because it could only be in the last 3 years. Yeah. That's how long they've known it. I have a question mark about whether or not, again, Riley and Spike, when they're sitting having a drink together, it's like fully in sunlight. It's just like so bright there, and just like, what were you thinking? I have a question mark over the way they represent Riley in the scene where he's asking Buffy to hit her, because I thought he looked like Stanley Thingamajig from Streetcar in that, or Marlon Brando specifically, the white t-shirt and the kind of like, anyway. And I was like, I wonder if that's what is intentionally done. And I want to know if they actually put Mark Blucas on a helicopter for this episode, and at what risk he was of falling out of the helicopter.
Is it the same helicopter that the Watchers Council uses when they try to pick up Faith and Angel? I think it was actually.
Yeah. That's a great question. Okay, fashion. What fashion notes do you have for us, Joe?
Willow and Xander have the exact same haircut in this episode.
Oh, it's true, they do.
It's great.
Willow pulls it off better though.
Yeah. Actually, Tara wasn't in this episode, was she?
No, she wasn't.
Yeah. Otherwise, a lot of turtlenecks. And when Buffy goes sleuthing, she's wearing her turtleneck, her sleuthy turtleneck. She's also wearing the same brown leather jacket that I'm convinced that Riley was wearing when he visited Joyce in the hospital.
This one was much longer. Though he is much taller.
He is
so
taller, see, and yeah, all the army guys are in there like
fatigues.
They're night camo fatigue, which is quite funny. And yet we see Anya's kind of going very kind of bright curly hair, floral dress, that kind of pattern, which is kind of, I think, defines her later show. And Xander looks like he's a couple of weeks into quarantine without a haircut.
He really does.
And has like just kind of, you know, I've walked from my bedroom to my Zoom call kind of level of well dressed apportionment. Yeah,
you're not wrong at all. I have no other fashion notes. Do you have a death count there, Joel?
Yeah, the 7 vampires from Whip's den, which Buffy murders in a 7-point combo.
Alarming alacrity,
exactly. And that's it. And obviously the death of Riley and Buffy's relationship. Rip.
Yeah, rip indeed. Okay, and what is your rating?
Ooh, my rating. I would give this episode 6.8 weepy chickens.
Weepy chickens.
Mm-hmm.
Where's there a weepy chicken?
It's something that Anya says earlier in the episode.
Okay, tell me about
that. I thought it was serviceable.
Sure.
I thought that Buffy's the supporting cast performances all perfectly good. Some of the interactions between Anya and Willow and Giles, that was quite salient. Dawn Dawn's racking up for me episodes where she's not annoying me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Obviously that's probably going to get worse later on, but I'm like, no, actually I liked Dawn being here. Joyce is effervescent in the scene she's in.
So wonderful.
Yeah. And so clearly comfortable with her daughter growing into a young woman and kind of like having a more mature relationship with her and all that kind of stuff. The Riley stuff is necessary, but it's
shit.
It's just weird and very Baywatch Nights vibe to it. So yeah, I think it gets the job done, but really just 6.8 at most.
Yeah, I'm going to go for 6.0 strangely literals out of 10. It was only fine at best. I think the characters are well portrayed. I think it gets to a point in the show where it's better, i.e. Riley being gone, but it is very much an escape hatch, and I think that's the most distinct thing about the episode. I don't think it has much to do otherwise. It's a bad send off to an okay character.
Yeah.
Okay.
Marie Kondo that bitch.
Huh?
Marie Kondo's that bitch.
Yeah. Indeed.
Yeah.
Joe, the Cordelia Chase. What's his name in this episode?
Reunion.
I quite liked it.
Pretty good episode of Angel.
I actually really liked it, to be honest. It's one of my distinct memories of watching Angel originally.
Yeah, there's a lot to say for it. So, really strong premise. Essentially, Drusilla's come back. She's going to revive Darla. Where it's going to happen, etc. All that kind of stuff.
Darla, who immediately yeets herself off a building.
She does do that. Yeah. It is a very classic vampire episode of this Buffy Angel vampverse, which
a very
really
strong vampire episode. Really reintroducing the vampire fear.
Yeah, it reintroduces the idea of good vampires, strong vampires being a real threat and a real terror. So you have some strong imagery like Drusilla being a classicist. So she buries Darla in a white dress under some soil on Earth to be reborn. She when she's reborn, there's this interesting lore interaction where she's initially fighting both Drusilla and Angel, and there's a question of could she potentially have retained her soul or retained a soul-like behavior, and they go on a killing spree, Drew and Darla, and eventually she's resentful of Drusilla for doing this to her, but what eventually overcomes her and brings her back to the side is the twisted sense of family she has Drusilla still, while being incredibly dangerous, very vulnerable, and she comforts Drusilla when she gets upset and says, look, we'll do this again, and that's kind of what brings it all together, which is contrasted with where the family is blown apart elsewhere in the episode. And we have Angel progressively obsessively trying to find her, specifically the powers that be sending him a vision of someone trying to kill themselves and him being like disarming that as quickly as possible and trying to get away from it, not caring, which I think is contrasted or paralleled with the Buffy episode, where Buffy's also like, I don't care about where my priorities are with Gloria. I want to do this thing that I want to do right now. And so one of the stronger images of Angel is Holland Mathers from Wolf and Hart, who is the head honcho, who thinks he has all his plans coming together. Is hosting a wine tasting in his wine cellar in his house, and thinks that he has the vampires under his thumb. And Drew and Darla turn up, and it has very home invasion vibes, where Holland's like, we're all friends here, and it's
very
clearly
funny
games. Clearly knows that a tremendous danger they're in. And a massive tipping point for Angel's character being that he arrives, he apologizes to Darla that he didn't save her, and then he leaves Holland and all of the lawyers of Wolf and Hart, locks them into the room to be killed by Darla and Drusilla.
Yeah.
And then when he goes back to the Hyperion Hotel, and he tells the gang about this, the gang who have very little to do in the episode. Otherwise, they're like, and it's actually, when Wesley started saying this, I could hear the line in my head. It really embedded for me. But he says, the three of us are all to stand between you and real darkness. And Angel's like, you're right. You're all fired.
Yeah.
And then it's just on their kind of shocked faces, And it's only midway through the season, so it's actually quite an early break tilt for him.
I think it needed it, though, because season one kind of like didn't have much in the way of structure.
Yeah, but it was absolutely an episode that like reintroduces vampires under the right circumstances, where you're not the Vampire Slayer, are fucking terrifying. And there's a strong mythology there. And probably my favorite moments in the episode was a hilarious scene where Cordelia is in the back of the convertible having a vision, and so they do a U-turn to go in the other direction, and on the DVDs that we have, I was like, that is fully a mannequin.
It was a mannequin just flopped out, and like, big orange face on it, just like straddling the back of the car.
My guess, because the other three people in the car, stuntmen or not, they were there, they were humans.
They seemed to be people,
My guess is that because Cordelia was meant to look like her head back on the back of the seat, kind of splaying out, not kind of safely sitting, is that it wasn't safe to actually whip her around in that position. But it looks like they have taken a CPR dummy out for a drive, and it gave me a good lol. But yeah, I would say one of the strongest episodes of Angel for me. Probably, I'll give it right up there. I'll give it kind of a 9.
Yeah, I was thinking Gestures as well. I think it's really strong and really fun.
Yeah, so
much better than Buffy this week anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when Angel knocks a Buffy episode out of the park, that always gives it a little point boost as well. But Dave Boreanaz is like just
he's very intriguing,
consistently fun to watch. He does this thing where he kind of looks not to you, like, to the character, but not in your eyes directly, which is like left and right, and looks exasperated, which is like one of his like looks, and it's just like endlessly like, I feel his frustration when he does that. Yeah. You
also want to kill a room full of people?
Well,
I mean, when it's just the two of us, if you killed me, it'd be a room full. You often want to kill me.
So thanks very much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you're keeping well. There will be perhaps some lean times ahead, but will be
perhaps some what?
Some lean times ahead.
Do we say that Ireland's going to a second lockdown?
Yeah. But we will persevere. What will Buffy do? Freak out, probably.
Buffy would simply find the virus and kill it.
She would. She'd make it manifest and punch it in the heart.
And then cry.
Much to think about there. So thanks very much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please let us know. We really appreciate it. Tell your friends. Tell your...
You haven't thought about this? Go on.
I'm thinking about it now. Well, okay, smart guy. What would you say?
I would say tell your newly human and strangely literals to listen to us next time.
Listen to Buffy Boys here on this channel.
Yeah,
see how well it works. Yeah.
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye.
See you.
Bye bye. See you. Goodbye.
Great. Thanks very much.